Alright, we're back here. What I wanted to go over right now was laying up this carbon fiber landing gear. So I've got a couple molds here. One of them's ready to be laid up, and I want to explain what I did with the gel coat and how I did it. And then what I'm going to do is put the gel coat in another mold and probably gel coat a couple carbon fiber landing or bell crank molds. So this is the way I was doing the carbon landing gear. Now, pre-preg and high temp molds, and there's a lot better, quicker ways to do it. This is what I was doing probably in the mid 90s. It still works today. So I'm going to lay it up at room temp, and then I'm going to actually post cure it after it's out of the mold and finished. So I'll go over that here. Put my phone out of the way so I don't get resin on it. Okay, so I've got the mold laid out. This is already set up with the gel coat in it. So it's been waxed and PVA'd. Make sure I got it in the screen here. Eventually I'm going to get a camera where I can see what's going on without a delay from the front of it. Okay, so this is a landing gear mold from a control line aerobatic airplane, probably in the mid 90s. So what I've done is I've gel coated on top the PVA, the top and bottom. And this gel coat's been on here for a year. I've had it in the warming box, and so it'll be okay. I had to put more PVA on this mold right in this area here because some of it had flaked off. So that's why you see sort of a two-tone look. And it's important when you gel coat this mold, or at least I found out on the landing gear, you don't want the gel coat to go around the face of this mold where it closes right here. It creates an interference when you close the mold. What this gel coat is HTR 250 1063, and I've added black pigment to it, and it's just cosmetic. It has no effect on the strength of the gear. So as you see, I just put the face with gel coat, and then when it came time to do the inside, I wiped the gel coat on the inside of this mold, and I wiped it up the sides all the way through here, and then I took a piece of paper towel wrapped around a blade, and I went through there and removed very gently what was going up on the sides of the mold here. So I wanted to keep the gel coat down in the mold. So that's already been done, so basically you just have to go with what I explained. Now the landing gear is a relatively simple part to make because it's just obvious, it's just one big shape. It just forms and that's it. And problems with some of the gears people have made in the past, the resin wasn't high temp enough. So there's other resins out there that are high temp. You can use them. They all work good, I'm sure. This is the HTR 250. It's Resin Services. And I got this 1063. It's the curing agent. And 250 and the 1063 was the best case scenario for the landing gear. Now it's not as thin as what you use on a bell crank or what I was using. It was a little bit higher viscosity, so it took a little bit more working to get it right, but it didn't matter because it's easy to work the toe, as you'll see. So the next step, and I can't remember how much resin I was mixing up, so I'm going to have to guess. And I'll probably go by a visual, but I think it'll be around 50 grams. And the way this resin works, the 250 and 106.3, it's by 24%. So I'll get my calculator back over here. We'll figure out what the ratio is here, what I need. So this cup, let's see what we got here. I think the cup is, let's see, about almost 4 grams. Could have done this before I turned the camera on, but okay, 3.3 on this cup. So I got to remember to subtract that much from the resin, or the total weight of the resin in the cup, so that way I don't get my curing agent messed up. Let's see what, let's go with, let's set it at around 50 grams. See how much that gets us. Sometimes I can tell visually by the cup. It's pretty close to what I needed. And what's left over after this landing gear, it's going to be used on the gel coat anyway, so if I mix up a little extra, it's okay. So overshot the 50. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's do some math. I got 56.5. See if I can find my calculator here. All right, 56.5. 5 minus 3.3. 53.2. And I need 24%. What's 24%? $65.968. $65, we could almost call that 66, so I just round up. This gram scale is 1/10 of a gram. Okay, I always like to do it twice, make sure I didn't dumb thumb it. Plus 24%. 65,968. Okay, now I got to add the 3.3 back in there. $69,268. Okay, so we're going to call that 69.3. 69 3/10. 3.2 plus 24 plus 3.3. Okay, 69.3. Sort of like the old saying, measure twice, cut once. Calculate twice, pour once. 69.3. It's amazing how you get tired and you start looking at the wrong side of the tape measure or the calculators, whatever. Alrighty. So I mix up curing agent in these little bottles. Probably going to take every bit of what's in this bottle. As you can see, I didn't open the full lid here. I just put a little hole in it. Probably could have poured it from the jug, but should be coming up on it. There we go. Now I'll take my old trusty screwdriver. This one's been rounded off so many times it works out good for stirring. So technically, when you start mixing this epoxy, if you want to do it by the book, what they tell you to do is mix it in the cup like I'm doing now. Once you get it fully mixed, pour it out of this cup into another cup and keep stirring it. So what they're trying to do is get the possibility of missing some of the resin that's down in the cup out of the equation. But you can see the screwdriver through the cup. You can tell, you know, that it's actually going down in the grooves. And I've never had any problems with uncured resin. I'll make sure it's mixed up good enough. And like I said, this screwdriver is all worn out and rounded off. If you use a brand new screwdriver, you're going to cut a hole in this plastic cup. So they always tell you don't use a wooden stick, which I agree. Use a metal paddle or a screwdriver that's been corners softened on it. And the reason why I know that you can cut through the cup is I've done it. I've stood here and stirred resin up in a thin cup like this. All of a sudden it started running through my fingers. So you can see the viscosity of this resin. It's fairly thin. But it still takes a little bit of work to wet this carbon out. I'll show you how I do it. And I've got 4 strands, 48K. It's going to take more than that, but I'm going to start out with 4. So I'm going to fill up this axle tab here, and then I'll probably have to add a little bit more towards the center. I think 4 will get me in the ballpark. What you want to do, if you can, lay up as much as you can at one time, and once you get it all perfected to where you know exactly what it takes to fill a certain mold, you can go ahead and make a note of that, and then you can wet out all your carbon tow at one time, and that way all you have to do is pick it up, put it in the mold, close it, and you're done. So that's looking pretty good. The other thing you can do, I mentioned on doing the bell cranks, you can actually take the acid brush and finish stirring it. That makes sure that you get down in the crevices of the cup. And this is what I mean by that. You just take the acid brush, and that way you're guaranteed that you're cleaning the sides up really good. Okay, now this is sort of the fun part. Move this mold out of the way a little bit. So what you can do, it helps wet it out a little bit quicker. You can take the sizing on the carbon and you can sort of do this a little bit. And what it does, it loosens the sizing up a little bit. It's not as stiff and it wets out a little quicker. Not too much, just enough to make it a little softer. Come down here like that. And one of the techniques I found that worked really well is I'll take the carbon and I'll roll it like this. And you can tell from feeling the carbon if it's starting to get slippery. You can feel spots that aren't actually wet out. And then what you want to do, you just keep rolling it back and forth. And it doesn't take too long. And then instead of pouring it, you can actually, if you find a little dry spot, just get your brush out, work some more over there. Now with this carbon, you want to make sure you keep it all stretched out. Don't want too many curlicues here. So this is wetting out pretty good. Doesn't take too long. And don't worry, if you put too much in there, you just squeegee it out. Sometimes it's probably good to overload it a little bit and then take some out. You can take some out with paper towel, or you can actually just do this. More carbon, less resin. Back this way. So this removes the resin and it also works it in the toe. So earlier I was on Stun Hanger. I uploaded a video to Stun Hanger, and what I was doing is prepping a mold, and the mold was for an RC gear. And you saw me, if you watched Stun Hanger, when I was working on that video of that mold, I took a file and I cleaned the mold up, and I think I got cut out or timed out about an hour. And I got to the point where I was PVA in it, and that was where it cut out. So if you came from Stun Hanger or you watched that part of the video, this video will pretty much take off where that one left off. So you saw me spraying the PVA on a mold, and you can go back and look at Stun Hanger and watch the PVA, or see the previous videos I've done. And then this part here is after the gel coat is already in the PVA. So by the magic of digital streaming, we have another mold ready to go. Now, don't be too afraid to manhandle this toe. Pick it up, and you can actually stretch it, work it through your fingers, you know, get the consistency you want, get as much resin out of it as you can, and then you just lay it in there like this. Now, like I said, this carbon here, it's going to be too much. When when we close the mold, you know, you have a little squeeze out, but and you want it fairly straight. If some of the toe is sort of wavy, just a little bit, it's not going to hurt anything. So it's going to take probably, I'll go with one more or two more to here. And what I like to do is, this landing gear mold is set up to where it's got 3 bolts, one here, and one in back. So landing gear, when it's landing, basically these will be under tension as the gear's trying to go this way when you land. This bolt here, you only need one because it's under compression. So that saves a little weight. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to nip these ends off that were a little bit too big down here. And I'm going to fill up this area right here. And that's where the little triangular jog out is. And then again, don't be afraid to, you know, push this down in there. And if you get some that's curled up, straighten it out. Just make sure you don't dig into the mold. So get it to where you want it. And I'll show you before I close the mold up, you know, I'll do the final trim out on the vertical legs here. See, I'm going a little bit past there. And I take this toe and I sort of fill in up here. So when you lay up this carbon, think of it as like a leaf spring, you know, as you got a leaf spring that's one that's full length and they progressively get shorter. And that's what you want to do with a carbon toe on this gear. You don't want to end anything here. Right here is the stress point. And where a lot of these gears fail, they're not continuous toe, they're fabric. And what'll happen, they'll delam right here. So what you're trying to do on these leaf springs you're laying in here, you're trying to make sure that, you know, they go out to here, but don't make them end here. It's just you want them ending right in here. And when you make the master plug or the gear to make the mold, you sort of keep that in mind where you want to have the most carbon at. So obviously it's thicker here than it is out there. So this toe, I'm going to put some like right in here. Let's see what this gets me. Okay, so I got a long piece here and I got a shorter piece. I got some stuff on it there. I got something that shouldn't be on there. So I'm going to stagger these so this one's in center. So that looks like it's lined up about right. Looks like I got styrofoam in this toe. I think when I did a mock-up I had this carbon toe laying around some styrofoam. So I'm back to where I was. I got this laid out. Got to wet this out. So it's going to be painfully obvious here that on this resin, when I mixed up, what was it, 60 grams or something? That's way too much. But that's okay. I'll see what I got left over and I'll know next time how much to make. Probably around 30, 35 for this size gear. You can see or not, but and you can, by rolling it, you can feel dry spots. can clean off extra resin by wiping it. I can't remember what these gears weighed when I was making them. They were reasonable. I was a lot lighter than the aluminum. But once I got to testing them and looking at them, I knew I could make them lighter. If you look at these RC pattern guys, they got some really wispy carbon gears. I'm not really sure if they're weave or continuous toe. So we're going to place this in there and center it. We're getting pretty close. So we got 4 pieces of toe, and we got the ends here, so this makes 6. And we're going to take the 6 down almost to the bend. If you get any crap in there, just dig it out. So now we're getting pretty close to where we need to be. And when it comes time to fill in the center, spread it out a little bit. Now what you can do down here at the vertical leg of this, you can actually fill it up with some cloth if you want. You can put some plates on there, add some cloth to it. So now that I've got some shorter stuff and a little bit shorter, and then of course the long, I'm going to go back with another one that goes all the way over and encapsulate the shorter ones down on the vertical leg. I got to figure this out as far as what I want to do with it. It's been a while since I've made one of these. So sort of ad-libbing here as I'm going along. Once I get it figured out. At one time I pretty much had it memorized what I needed in these molds. It's been years. I made a gear over at Saturday at John's, I believe. We were streaming one day. If I remember right, we did one of these. And I was back to the same thing. I was trying to figure out what I needed to put in there. Now when I gel coat this other landing gear mold, I'm going to put some black pigment in what I got left over here. And then I'm going to also probably coat the bell crank molds with some gel coat. Now the bell cranks are laid up with EPON 815. I've got other videos on that. But it's okay to use this resin to gel coat. I mean, it's okay. You can put this on a gel coat and still put 815 over it. So there's quite a bit of resin coming out of here. One of the things with 250 is, I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of a slick resin, sort of gooey. It's a thicker resin. It wets out beautiful, but it's got more body to it or something. I don't know how to describe it. But as long as you squeegee this resin out on this toe, you're gonna be golden. It's gonna be a good high temp gear. This is a I can't even remember what this mold is, if it's high temp or room temp. I've always made them at high temp or low temp. I take them out of the mold and then I'll post cure them in the oven once they're out of the mold. So this is going to go all the way down. Get my stuff out of there. pretty boring process, but it's maybe it's one you haven't seen before. Now, as you lay this in the mold, squeegee it down through there, and you can sort of hear the air bubbles come out, especially down here. This part, it's really easy to get a good layup. It's all directional. So it looks like this toe here, right in here, is exactly where we need to be. This toe, it looks like in the mold here, it needs a little bit more, just by what I remember this mold should look like. So I'm going to cut 2 more pieces for here, and that'll be the leaf spring effect. Can't have too much paper towel around here with this. Try to keep the gloves fairly clean. Got 6 watchers. So I'm going to go like right in here, and I'm going to make the next one a little shorter. If you're making a prop, it's the same process, which I'll do that later. Not today, but I'll do some props, propellers, and that way you'll be able to see how the toe progresses through the mold from the tip to the hub. I'd like to experiment on some electric props. And right back to the paper here again. So ideally, I wouldn't be doing this back and forth. I'd have one wet out. All this toe would be staggered and laid out at one time. And so I wouldn't have to keep cutting. But you get the idea. Now the new mold I got here, I'm just going to have to eyeball that too. I'll go through there and figure out how that's all going to work. Another thing you can do, now these sort of slid around on me. I had a short one and a long one. What you can do is feather it a little bit and try to keep the ends to where it doesn't end abrupt. Feather it out. That way you don't have a stress riser, if that makes any sense. Being on the top, it's like a leaf spring on the top, so you definitely want the toe on the bottom of the landing gear to be continuous, because that's where the force is at. All the toe on the bottom is under tension. The stuff on the top is under compression. So if you have short toe under the bottom, the tension, and you have long and short, then that's where your stress riser is going to be. So if you can keep continuous length on the first 4, progressively get a little bit shorter, fill in here, do the leaf spring effect, you'll be all right. This resin, HDR 250, you could put this in the oven, usually post-cure it. You can go up to like 250, 300 degrees or something. I don't know what it is. It's up there pretty good. So once this gear is made, you're going to have something you can set on a hot asphalt runway and not have to worry about it. Matter of fact, over time, this gear will end up getting better and better. It'll actually post-cure. If you don't post-cure it, if you make this at room temp, you take this out and set it on your airplane or set it on the tarmac, and the asphalt's 150, 180 degrees, the resin will actually start to get harder, where everything else is going to get softer on you. So this is filling up nice. I think I got it where I want it. It might have a little washout, but it looks like nothing too bad. So basically you're filling it the way I have this laid out, to the top of this mold, and that's what you want. all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to put a little chop in the center right around in here. It's not going to hurt anything. Take a pinch right there. And that'll add a little cross biaxial strength or whatever. And there was just a little bit right in here where a little chop could help. If you don't have chop, you can just take some toe, snip it off. So that'll make a nice bolting pad. And here again, I mean, it's one of these things where you can debulk it right in the mold. Suck up some of that resin. Now, at the beginning of the video, you could see where I took the gel coat and I kept it away from the draft angle, if you remember watching that. Up here it doesn't matter because it's flat. Before I close this mold, what I want to do, obviously have some clamps ready, but I want to take this carbon and I want to push it away from that draft angle right here. So in effect, I want to sort of push the carbon up in the same shape that it's going to be when the mold closes. So when this mold comes down, I want this sharp edge right here to be able to go down in that groove. If the carbon was all the way up to the edge, then some of the carbon would come out of the mold. In effect, what's going to happen with this sharp edge when I pull the carbon in, it's going to compress and squeeze the carbon in, create less washout. And I've had them, a couple of them where I had them where there's no toe washout. So poke the carbon in away from that draft angle face. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you gotta get it a little bit to get it started. And then as you see, as you push it in a little bit, you can see how it's starting to hump up. And that's what's going to fill there. So after you make a few of them, it sort of becomes second nature to what you're looking for. Now all this stuff here I'm sort of going over. It's sort of, I don't know what I want to say, sort of boring, but it's always the little things. It'll make a big difference. I'm going to take some of this chop, move it around. So that looks like I've got a pretty good fill. So I got my clamps ready. One of the things I like to do, you don't have to, but get a better part. I like to come into this part of the mold and wet it out a little bit. I don't know, it just seems like instead of a dry mold on a, seems like it's it helps a little bit, helps it slide together. Like I said, if you ever went the pre-preg route, it would be the ultimate way to do it. But what I'm showing you here, with the materials and the process of this hand-laid mold, hand-laid gear, you can do some really neat, high-quality stuff, relatively inexpensive. The beauty of this is, with all this composite tooling, if this landing gear becomes obsolete in a year or two, you don't have anything. You're not losing anything, really. I mean, when you start paying CNC shops to machine all this stuff, it's, you know, it takes a while to amateurize your mold out to where, you know, you're going to have all that cost paid for, but so I add a little bit on the top, put a little bit more here. It's all going to be squeezed out. Basically, that just makes sure I get rid of the air bubbles. Now, make sure you got this thing lined up right. I got the molds marked here. It's marked there. And close it. And that's all there is to that. Now, it usually takes 4 clamps to do the top and bottom half. And what I normally do, I'd put it in a vise. I'd chuck this bottom in the vise so I could clamp it. We're going to try clamping this thing without a vise. Sort of do it the hard way here. So don't hammer the first vise down. Let it snug up a little bit. And the bigger the mold, the slower it closes. One of the advantages of having a good clamp versus a cheap one is what you're seeing right here. I've had cheap clamps and they stick, they don't open, they don't close right. So I got out of the habit of going to the cheap clamps. I thought, you know, these are 10 bucks. I thought I'm going to go ahead and get something decent, and it pays off. There's nothing worse than struggling with a clamp, trying to get it on a mold. Spilling my resin here. There's no way to do this and be clean about it, I can guarantee you that. So it's like tightening lug nuts, you know, back and forth, and you'll tighten something and it feels tight, but then you'll go back and it'll tighten some more. And I just alternate the clamps for balance. You got all these clamps, might as well use them right. One of the things you don't want to do is put uneven pressure on this mold. And just go back and forth, and you can see, if you're looking at the face, you can see the squeeze out and some of it, and you can sort of watch this line as you tighten it. You know, you want that line to be uniform all the way across. Looks like it's closing up good. A little bit more in the center. I've never broke a mold, so that's good. So that's pretty tight. That's about as tight as it's going to get. Now, you're probably wondering about the bottom of this mold. So what has to happen next is we're going to lay the mold over. And then we're going to work on this. Let me see if I got that in focus. As you can see, I took the gel coat and I put it on that face, which is good. Now I'm going to cut this right where it ends. Be careful there, you don't want to really cut it too short. There you go. Now, all that extra resin is coming out right here at the end. You can see it's all wet. More paper towel. And I'll go through here and squeegee that out. And sort of hear the air bubbles come out. You're going to pack that toe down in there. And it looks like it needs to be cut a little bit more. So you sort of ease up on it, sneak up on it. And let's say you make this gear and comes out of the mold and it looks a little weak here. I mean, wouldn't get too worked up over it. You can always add more plates to it. You can always beef this up after the fact if you think you need a thicker one. And see how that's it's coming out pretty nice there, nice and flat. So what I do next, I get a little cloth. Let me find some here. Now, it's nice to have carbon cloth, but that's all right. I got some glass here handy. This is probably, it's pretty light stuff, 2 ounces, pretty light. I'm just going to cut a couple pieces of this. And this will add a little strength. So I'll take this glass and I'll start adding it. Now if you have some carbon fiber plate, like dragon plate or something, you could take a 1/16 inch plate of carbon that's already formed, pre-preg, cut it out and glue that on there and have a killer nice vertical leg. Or you can just do this with some scrap. The other thing, this sort of holds it all flat. And put four layers. And that's good for right now. I'll go to the other side. And there's no way around it. You're going to have a lot of run out. This is going to be messy. But that's all right. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Find out where that ends and cut it. Got lucky on that. And this gear, it's for a control line stunner. And to be honest with you, the control line stunt gear doesn't take a beating like an RC gear does. I mean, if you were making an RC gear this size, you wouldn't want to scrimp too much, but these things are pretty docile and light. I'll do 4 pieces here too. So we got 10 people watching. If you guys have any questions, type them in the, I'll look over there at them. So if you have questions, type them in there, I'll answer them. Sometimes if you over wet it, you just keep adding the glass cloth, it comes out right. Now one of the things, I'm going to put aluminum plates on here. Those aluminum plates are going to clamp across the mold. And I used free coat for that, for a release agent. Sometimes I wax them, but the best thing to do is just take those aluminum plates that I'm going to show you here in a minute, put some free coat mold release on them. And you can tell when this glass is wet out, it starts to get, you can see the carbon through it. So that looks pretty good. I dumped some of my resin out of my cup here. Made a mess over here where you can't see it. Once this glass cloth dries, it'll almost look like carbon because the black just comes right through it. So that's nice and flat, and that's where it needs to be. When you're doing this, you think, oh, what a freaking mess, you know, but once you get it out of the mold and clean it up, it looks really good. These are the little aluminum plates I was talking about. They got the clamp mark on one side, and I keep one face of it nice and smooth, and they just go like that. And from there, I'll take a longer clamp. Well, maybe the 12-inch will do it. Let me see if this will reach. No. I'll go over here and get a bigger one. And this just goes right here. I'll lay it down on here like this. I'll tell you what, I think I'll move it this way since most of the weight is towards me. No, I won't. I'll have to go this way. It'll set better. So put it right there. Make sure these are all the way down. Once you tighten the clamp up, it shouldn't move, but when you're tightening it, these things will swim around a little bit. That looks good over there. I think I need a little bit more bite. There we go. Snug it up really good, and that's about all there is to it. Clean up a little of this squeeze out. You can see where some of the chop squeezed out, which is alright. It overfilled that area. So really that's it on laying up a gear. I mean, I could have cut down the time a lot if I would have actually knew what to put in there. I'll make a note before I quit today of what I got in there. Started out with 4, 2 more, 6. So we're looking at 8 or 10. And I think that'll get us where we need to be on the toe. Clean up my clamps a little. One of the things you got to watch out for these clamps, you don't want to get the resin in these serrated bars of these clamps. Okay. flip her over. It's best if you have a designated bench for this. In the past, I'd have just a composite bench. All right, we'll take this thing and we'll stand it up out of the way. And I'll let that thing gel up here at room temp, and I'll put it in the hot box and finish it off. Okay, so now we're back to this little bit of resin in the cup. It's the 250, which is what we just laid the gear up out of. And I spilled a little bit here. So now what I'm going to do is take, I don't know, about 15 grams of this. And I'm going to actually put in some black coloring. Now if this thing cuts off, it gets timed out. I'm not sure how much time I've got. It usually cuts off in an hour. So it doesn't take much of this black coloring. And one of the things you can do to make this stick to the mold a little bit better is put some Cabosil or thickening agent in it. The way it looks, probably won't need to do that very much at all. See from when I started to now, you can see the viscosity. It's really changed, a lot thicker. And you're really not mixing curing agent here. All you're doing is just making sure the black color is evenly distributed in the resin. And this stuff is made to go in epoxy resin, so you're good there. Okay, I think I'll probably go with a clean brush. And I'm going to, let me see how this is going to go in here. Get the pins up. I sprayed these earlier today. PVA'd them. So what you want is a really thin coat. Even. Don't want any buildup anywhere. And like I've said previously, basically this is just your cosmetic. It serves a cosmetic purpose, but it also serves the purpose of when you're packing the mold, you can be a lot rougher and put your fingers and thumbs in it without busting the PVA, if that makes any sense. So if I was mixing this up, this resin, it'd probably be too thin to do this. But the nice thing about it now, I mean, it's starting to kick off a little bit and it's getting thicker, which in turn makes it perfect for this gel coat. Now I don't know if you've ever wondered or thought about it, but this oil light bearing in the center here, it's got little notches cut out of it. There's little dimples on the side of it. And what that does, it keys it in. So once that resin actually cures around that bearing, it won't come out. Otherwise, that bearing, when you knock it out of the mold, would probably come out of the carbon, but it's physically, mechanically attached. Because I don't think there's a way to take an oil light bronze bushing and get epoxy to stick to it. So if you're ever wondering why that bearing is in there like it is, it's keyed in there. And I did a short video a long time ago. It showed me actually doing that, putting the pins in there. I think eventually what I need to do is go through all my videos that I'm live streaming eventually, put them all together and edit them, and get everything laid out to where it's in a cohesive, understandable mix. So I got 4 of these. I got a gel coat. Slide the pin up. So I got 4, and then I got some more molds that already been gel coated. I forgot I had. I guess there was a lot of stuff sitting in the warmer. So this is a good example of taking extra resin that you just had from one part, not wasting it. Get any questions, drop me in the message thing, the comments. Now, the bell cranks obviously are control line. There's no other, purpose or no other use for them really. Now the landing gear, you can actually make anything you want. Sequoia gear, sky's the limit on how you'd form up those molds to make different gear. And that would be RC. You could even make up drone parts if you wanted to have a certain shaped arm or some composite structural part. So there'd be a lot of uses for the landing gear type stuff. So this goes in pretty good. It could probably use a little Cavasil maybe, but it's laying down pretty good. You got to be careful around the tight corners. You don't want it to puddle. Now what I'm going to do next is the landing gear mold, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as keeping the gel coat or the epoxy off the face. I'll do this one first. So you don't have to be too neat when you first go. I mean, don't get too crazy, but in the center you're going to brush it all the way up the sides. Okay. Let's see if I can get it on here. Get a little bit closer. And then when you go down the side, I'll show you, before we get timed out, I'll show you how to clean it off the closing face of the mold, because that's important. So don't get too crazy worrying about cleaning it. Brush it in there nice and neat. And then what you want to do is you're going to clean the draft angle. Now here, just go ahead and coat this whole pad. And that'll leave you with a good surface to actually compact your toe on. Make sure it doesn't pool down in there. Now what I like to do, well, it's pretty imperative I think, to actually clean this mold face off. I take my paper towel,